The United Earth Council chamber hummed with an uncomfortable silence. Holographic displays flickered around the circular room, projecting star charts and diplomatic insignias from a dozen alien civilizations. Ambassador Karen Reynolds stood alone, a solitary human representative surrounded by towering, multi-limbed diplomats whose expressions ranged from mild amusement to outright contempt. Humanity's proposal for expanded communication networks is mathematically impossible, declared Krelvax, the primary representative of the Crystalline Confederation. His translucent body shifted with prismatic colors, each movement a complex language of its own. Your species has been part of the Interstellar Confederation for merely 12 orbital cycles. To suggest you could revolutionize our fundamental communication infrastructure is beyond presumptuous. The chamber erupted in a chorus of clicks, whistles, and translated electronic speech. Most of the alien delegates didn't even attempt to hide their derision. Humans were the newest members of the galactic community, barely understood and constantly underestimated. Karen maintained her composure, a skill she had perfected over years of diplomatic negotiations. She knew the stakes were far more significant than mere technological pride. Earth's position in the galactic hierarchy hung in the balance. Communication was power, and right now, humanity was essentially voiceless. The current faster-than-light communication system was controlled by the Zorn Computational Collective, a network of hyper-intelligent machine beings who had maintained their monopoly on interstellar communication for over 3,000 standard years. Their quantum relay networks were considered the pinnacle of technological achievement, a system so complex that no other civilization had even come close to replicating it. Each communication between distant star systems took weeks, sometimes months. Worse, every transmission was filtered, analyzed, and potentially altered by the Zorn Collective. Humanity existed at the mercy of a communication infrastructure they didn't control and barely understood. The quantum impedance barrier is not a suggestion, continued Krelvax, his crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the chamber's curved walls. It is a fundamental law of physical interaction. Your scientists claim to have discovered potential breakthrough methods, but these are nothing more than mathematical fantasies. Karen knew the statistics by heart. Humanity's communication bandwidth was limited to less than 0.03% of the total interstellar network. Every diplomatic message, every scientific proposal, every cultural exchange was carefully monitored and frequently delayed or suppressed. The chamber's environmental controls shifted subtly, a reminder of the alien technologies that surrounded humanity. Gravity generators, atmospheric modulators, and quantum stabilization fields created an environment that was simultaneously familiar and utterly foreign. Humans were guests here, barely tolerated, constantly reminded of their technological inferiority. "We are not asking for control," Karen responded, her voice measured and precise. "We are proposing a collaborative approach to communication technology. Our researchers have identified potential quantum entanglement methods that could revolutionize." "Enough," interrupted Zalara, the neurological synthesis representative. Her biomechanical form pulsed with electromagnetic signals. "Your species has been part of the Confederation for less time than most of our research grants. You have no standing to propose technological innovations." The underlying message was clear. Know your place. But Karen understood something the other delegates did not. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to challenge impossible limitations. From the first moments, humans looked up at the sky and decided to explore beyond their planetary boundaries to the moment they developed faster-than-light travel. Human history was a continuous narrative of defying expectations. The communication systems controlled by the Zorn Collective were not just a technological infrastructure. They were a method of control, a way to maintain the existing power structures of the galactic community, and humanity was about to change everything. As the diplomatic session concluded, Karen caught the eye of Michael Thompson, who sat in the observation gallery. He gave her the slightest nod, a signal that their real work was just beginning. The quantum communication revolution would not be granted. it would be taken. The wind whipped across the research complex, sending dust devils dancing across the rust-colored Martian landscape. Inside his cramped laboratory, Michael Thompson stared at a wall covered in equations, mathematical symbols bleeding into one another like a fever dream of interconnected possibilities. Most of his colleagues had written him off as a scientific heretic. The quantum communication research grant he'd fought so desperately to maintain hung by a thread, reduced to a mere fraction of its original funding. Where once he'd commanded a team of 30 brilliant researchers, now only 4 remained, each as stubborn and marginalized as he was. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, his lead quantum physicist, carefully adjusted a delicate holographic projection. Her fingers danced across quantum entanglement simulations that defied conventional understanding. "We're missing something," she muttered, her voice a mixture of frustration and determination. Michael understood that look. It was the same expression he'd worn when his first wife left him, claiming his scientific obsession was destroying their marriage. It was the look of someone who knew they were on the verge of something revolutionary, but couldn't quite grasp the final piece of the puzzle. The history of his research was a testament to human persistence. 3 years ago, he proposed a radical theory of quantum communication that challenged everything the Interstellar Confederation believed about information transfer. His initial paper had been met with universal ridicule. The Zorn Computational Collective had published a 500-page rebuttal that essentially labeled him a scientific laughingstock. But Michael knew something the others didn't. Humanity's greatest innovations had always come from those willing to look beyond established scientific paradigms. The first powered flight, nuclear energy, space travel, each breakthrough had been preceded by experts declaring the idea impossible. His current research focused on a phenomenon he called quantum resonance adaptation. Traditional quantum entanglement worked on fixed principles, with information transfer limited by strict physical constraints. Michael believed these constraints were not immutable laws, but simply undiscovered limitations waiting to be overcome. "Look at this," Elena said, pulling up a complex holographic model. Quantum probability waves danced in 3-dimensional space, their interactions creating intricate patterns that seemed to defy standard mathematical models. Jack Chen, their computational specialist, leaned in. His fingers moved rapidly across a neural interface, pushing the simulation to its limits. "The probability cascades are showing unexpected coherence," he reported, a note of excitement creeping into his typically monotone voice. The research complex itself was a testament to humanity's outsider status. Built on Mars as a compromised location, neutral ground between Earth's governmental influences and the Interstellar Confederation's oversight, it represented both punishment and opportunity. Underfunded, understaffed, but completely autonomous. Michael's personal history was as unconventional as his research. A child of immigrants, he'd grown up hearing stories of how his grandparents had fought against systemic barriers. His mother, a quantum engineer, had always told him that the most important scientific discoveries came from asking the questions nobody else dared to ask. "We need more processing power," Jack said, interrupting Michael's thoughts. "The current quantum arrays are barely handling our simulation complexity." Michael smiled. Limitation had always been humanity's greatest motivation. Where alien races saw boundaries, humans saw challenges to be overcome. A notification pinged on the laboratory's communication system. Another rejection letter from the Interstellar Scientific Council. Another attempt to marginalize their research. Elena crumpled the digital document with a gesture of pure defiance. "They're afraid," she said simply. "Afraid of what we might discover." The laboratory hummed with equipment that represented the absolute edge of human technological capability. Quantum processors, neural network interfaces, holographic data projectors. Each piece of equipment was a testament to human ingenuity. Michael walked to the large window overlooking the Martian landscape. Red dust storms danced across ancient crater walls, a reminder of the harsh environment humans had already learned to survive in. If they could transform this dead planet into a research hub, what else might they accomplish? "We're close," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, a promise and a challenge. Jack and Elena looked up, understanding immediately. Close to what exactly? A breakthrough in quantum communication. A method of information transfer that would revolutionize everything humanity understood about interstellar communication. The quantum communication revolution was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. The experimental chamber looked like something between a scientific laboratory and a technological nightmare. Quantum processors the size of shipping containers hummed with barely contained energy, their cooling systems creating a constant background whisper that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. Michael Thompson stood at the central control panel, his hands moving with a mixture of precision and barely restrained excitement. Quantum stabilization at 87%, Jack Chen reported, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the carefully controlled environmental conditions. They had been working for 36 consecutive hours, fueled by synthetic caffeine supplements, and the kind of manic determination that defined human scientific pursuit. Elena Rodriguez checked and rechecked the quantum entanglement parameters. Her latest modifications to the experimental protocol represented months of theoretical work and years of accumulated frustration. The entire research team knew this moment was different. Something fundamental was about to change. The laboratory itself was a marvel of human engineering. Located in the depths of the Mars Research Complex, it sat within a crater that had been specially modified to provide quantum isolation. Massive electromagnetic shields surrounded the facility, protecting their experiments from external interference. Every surface was designed to minimize quantum decoherence, a challenge that had stumped alien researchers for centuries. Initializing quantum resonance cascade, Elena announced. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. Michael watched the holographic displays, each one representing a different aspect of their unprecedented experiment. They were attempting something that every established scientific body had declared mathematically impossible. A method of quantum information transfer that could bypass the fundamental limitations of faster-than-light communication. The first indication that something was happening came as a subtle shift in the quantum probability weights. Most researchers would have missed it, a microscopic fluctuation that lasted less than a femtosecond. But Michael and his team had spent years training themselves to recognize these almost imperceptible signs. "Did you see that?" Jack whispered, his eyes wide. Elena was already running verification protocols. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, isolating the anomalous data, running it through multiple computational filters. "Preliminary analysis suggests something impossible," she said, her scientific training fighting against the excitement building in her voice. The experiment was deceptively simple in concept. They were attempting to create a quantum communication channel that could transmit information instantaneously across vast distances. Every previous attempt by both human and alien researchers had failed, constrained by what was believed to be an immutable physical barrier. But Michael Thompson didn't believe in immutable barriers. The team had developed a novel approach that combined quantum entanglement with adaptive neural network algorithms. Where traditional quantum communication methods relied on fixed probability states, their system introduced a dynamic, self-modifying quantum information transfer protocol. "Quantum coherence maintaining stability," Jack reported, his voice a mixture of disbelief and scientific wonder. The holographic displays began to fill with data that defied conventional understanding. Information packets were forming and transferring in ways that should have been impossible. Quantum states were maintaining coherence far beyond any previously recorded duration. Michael remembered the words of his mother, a brilliant quantum engineer who had always encouraged him to challenge scientific orthodoxy. "The universe is not a locked door," she would say. "It's a puzzle waiting to be solved." Suddenly, the laboratory's primary quantum processor began to emit a strange, pulsing light. It wasn't part of their experimental design. It wasn't something they had anticipated or planned for. "Shut it down," Elena shouted, her hand moving toward the emergency kill switch. But Michael was transfixed. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the rising tension. The light continued to pulse, creating interference patterns that seemed to dance with a strange, almost conscious intelligence. For a brief moment, the very fabric of quantum reality seemed to ripple around them. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. Silence filled the laboratory. Jack was the first to speak. Did we just do something? Michael Thompson looked at the data streams, a smile slowly spreading across his face. They had done more than something. They had just taken the first step toward rewriting the fundamental understanding of communication in the universe. The quantum communication revolution had begun. The Interstellar Scientific Symposium erupted in a cacophony of derision. Holographic representations of researchers from 100 different civilizations filled the massive conference hall. Their collective laughter, a multilingual symphony of ridicule, directed at one singular point: the Human Quantum Communication Research Team. Dr. Excelnera of the Zorn Computational Collective stepped forward, her biomechanical form casting prismatic reflections across the chamber. Her voice, translated into perfect human English, dripped with academic condescension. The so-called breakthrough presented by Dr. Michael Thompson is nothing more than a statistical anomaly, a desperate attempt by humanity to prove its scientific relevance. The preliminary research paper had been leaked 3 standard galactic weeks after the initial experiment. What should have been a carefully managed scientific disclosure became a public spectacle of international and interstellar proportions. Michael sat in the observation gallery, surrounded by his small team. Elena Rodriguez gripped his hand, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes. Jack Chen monitored the live feeds, his face a mask of professional neutrality that barely concealed his simmering anger. The Krell Computational Analysis Board produced a 712-page report within hours of the paper's release. Each page was a meticulously crafted demolition of the human research, mathematical equations arranged like surgical instruments designed to dissect and destroy their claims. Let us break down the fundamental flaws, continued Dr. Excelnera, her holographic form expanding to fill the central projection space. Complex mathematical formulas materialized around her, a dazzling display of scientific intimidation. The quantum coherence duration claimed by the human researchers is mathematically impossible. Their experimental methodology demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of quantum information transfer. What the alien researchers didn't understand was the very nature of human scientific pursuit. Every dismissal, every mocking critique, only served to fuel the team's determination. Research funding evaporated instantly. Government support collapsed under the weight of international scientific ridicule. The Mars Research Complex found itself on the brink of complete shutdown. Equipment was being inventoried, research grants canceled, careers dismantled. "They're trying to erase us," Jack muttered, watching another wave of critical analysis flood their communication channels. Ambassador Karen Reynolds found herself fighting an impossible diplomatic battle. The Interstellar Confederation's Scientific Council had effectively declared the human quantum communication research a form of academic fraud. Diplomatic channels buzzed with recommendations to sanction the research team, to strip them of their scientific credentials. Michael understood the game being played. This wasn't just about scientific discovery. It was about maintaining existing power structures. The current faster-than-light communication network was a multi-trillion credit infrastructure controlled by a handful of alien civilizations. Any potential disruption represented an existential threat to their economic and political dominance. In the private research offices of the Mars complex, the team gathered. Walls covered with rejected grant proposals, critical scientific papers, and increasingly desperate funding requests created a backdrop of institutional rejection. "We knew this would happen," Michael said, his voice calm against the storm of criticism. "Every significant breakthrough in human history has been met with absolute rejection." Elena pulled up a historical projection. Images of groundbreaking scientists flickered to life, researchers who had been mocked, dismissed, and ultimately proven correct. The Wright brothers, Marie Curie, the early quantum mechanics pioneers, each had faced institutional rejection before changing everything. The Zorn Computational Collective's final report was a masterpiece of scientific dismissal. It wasn't just a critique. It was a systematic dismantling of their entire research approach. Mathematical proofs were arranged like intricate weapons, each equation designed to puncture the smallest hope of validity. But Michael saw something different. Within the criticisms lay the seeds of their next breakthrough. Each dismissal was another puzzle piece, another opportunity to refine their approach. "They're afraid," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, a declaration of war against scientific orthodoxy. Jack looked up, understanding immediately. The alien scientific community wasn't just rejecting their research. They were terrified of what it might mean. The quantum communication revolution would not be stopped by a few critical research papers. If anything, the mockery had just made their resolve stronger. Humanity had always been at its best when the entire universe said something was impossible. The research complex had transformed. Where once pristine laboratories and carefully organized workstations had dominated, now the space looked like a controlled chaos of human innovation. Quantum processors were jury-rigged with custom-built interfaces. Neural network algorithms sprawled across multiple holographic displays, and the air crackled with an almost tangible sense of possibility. Michael Thompson stood at the center of this technological maelstrom, his eyes reflecting the rapid-fire data streams that surrounded him. The global scientific community's rejection had become their greatest asset. Each critical paper, each dismissive analysis became another piece of the puzzle. "We're not trying to break the rules," Michael explained to Elena Rodriguez, who was recalibrating their quantum entanglement matrix. "We're trying to understand the rules better than anyone else ever has." Their new approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of fighting against the quantum communication limitations, they would adapt to them. Machine learning algorithms began to map the intricate quantum probability landscapes, creating dynamic pathways that shifted and reconfigured in real time. Jack Chen had developed a breakthrough neural interface that could process quantum information at unprecedented speeds. Traditional quantum computing worked with fixed states, qubits that were either 0 or 1. Their new system created something entirely different, quantum states that could adapt, learn, and modify themselves instantaneously. The team had been reduced to 4 core members, each working with a desperate intensity that bordered on obsession. Funding had dried up. Their research grants were canceled. The Mars Research Complex was weeks away from complete shutdown. But they were closer to a breakthrough than anyone realized. Elena's latest modification introduced a biological inspiration into their quantum algorithms. Drawing from neural network models that mimicked human brain plasticity, they created a quantum communication system that could learn and adapt in ways no previous technology had achieved. "Look at this," she said, pulling up a holographic display that looked more like an abstract painting than a scientific diagram. Quantum probability waves danced and intertwined, creating patterns that seemed to defy conventional mathematical understanding. Jack's computational analysis revealed something extraordinary. Their quantum communication model was developing predictive capabilities that went beyond simple information transfer. It was learning, evolving, creating communication pathways that adapted to environmental constraints in real time. Michael remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell. She had immigrated to a new country with nothing but hope and determination. Adaptability was not just a scientific principle, it was a fundamental human trait. The research complex had become a fortress of human potential. Every rejected grant, every dismissive scientific paper was transformed into fuel for their innovation. Where alien civilizations saw rigid scientific principles, humans saw flexible opportunities. Their quantum communication prototype was no longer just a theoretical concept. It was becoming a living system, a network that could learn and grow in ways that defied existing scientific understanding. "We're creating something more than a communication system," Michael said, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. "We're creating a new way of understanding information itself." The global scientific community continued to mock their research. The Interstellar Confederation's communication networks remained unchanged. But deep within the Mars Research Complex, a revolution was brewing. Alina's biological-inspired quantum algorithms began to show something unprecedented. The communication system was developing what could only be described as a form of adaptive intelligence. It wasn't just transferring information, it was understanding context, learning from each transmission, creating communication pathways that were both efficient and unpredictable. Jack's computational analysis revealed patterns that seemed to emerge spontaneously. The quantum communication network was self-organizing, creating redundant communication channels that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously if one pathway was compromised. "It's like watching a living organism develop," Jack muttered, his fingers moving rapidly across the neural interface. The mockery from the scientific establishment had become their greatest strength. Each criticism was analyzed. Each dismissive paper became another source of insight. Where traditional research would have collapsed, their team sought every obstacle as an opportunity for innovation. Michael looked at the holographic displays, watching the quantum communication prototype evolve in real time. They were no longer just challenging scientific limitations. They were rewriting the fundamental understanding of how information could be transmitted. The quantum communication revolution was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. The Interstellar Scientific Forum was packed with representatives from every known intelligent civilization. Massive holographic displays surrounded the central stage, each projection carrying the skeptical gaze of thousands of scientific delegates. The air itself seemed to crackle with anticipation and barely contained ridicule. Michael Thompson stood alone at the center of the massive circular stage, surrounded by equipment that looked more like an abstract art installation than a scientific demonstration. Elena Rodriguez and Jack Chen monitored the systems from a secondary control center, their fingers hovering over emergency shutdown protocols. Ambassador Karen Reynolds watched from the diplomatic gallery, her posture a perfect balance of diplomatic calm and barely contained hope. "We will now demonstrate instantaneous quantum information transfer across a distance of 500 light-years," Michael announced, his voice calm and clear. A collective laugh rippled through the alien delegates. The Zorn Computational Collective's lead representative, Dr. Excelnera, had already prepared a 900-page preliminary rebuttal. Scientific journals were primed to publish detailed analyses of what would surely be another human failure. The demonstration was deceptively simple in concept. Two quantum communication nodes had been placed at extreme opposite ends of known space. One sat near the galactic core, the other at the distant rim of explored space. No existing communication method could transmit information between these points with anything close to real-time responsiveness. Michael activated the first system. Quantum probability waves began to dance across holographic displays, creating intricate patterns that seemed to defy mathematical logic. Where previous quantum communication attempts created fragile, easily disrupted information channels, this system looked alive, organic, and dynamic. Jack's voice came through the communication link. Quantum coherence stabilizing. Adaptive pathways forming. The alien delegates began to lean forward. Something was different about this demonstration. Holographic displays showed the quantum information transfer in real time. Complex mathematical proofs, three-dimensional stellar cartography models, and intricate scientific data began to flow between the two distant nodes. Not in seconds, not in milliseconds. Instantaneously. Dr. Excelnera's holographic representation froze mid-motion. The Krull Computational Analysis Board's representatives stopped speaking. An impossible silence descended upon the forum. The demonstration continued. Michael began transmitting increasingly complex information. Quantum mechanical models that would typically take weeks to transfer now moved between the two nodes in less than a picosecond. The adaptive quantum communication system wasn't just transferring data, it was learning, evolving with each transmission. "Impossible," Dr. Excelnera whispered, her biomechanical form flickering with computational uncertainty. Elena's voice cut through the tension. "Transmission stability at 99.999999%. Zero information degradation detected." The implications were staggering. Every existing faster-than-light communication network relied on a series of relay stations, each introducing potential information loss and significant transmission delays. Their system bypassed these limitations entirely. Michael knew this was more than a scientific demonstration. This was a declaration of human potential. The quantum communication prototype began to display capabilities that went beyond simple information transfer. It was creating communication pathways, predicting potential interference, and adapting in real time. The system was learning, evolving with each millisecond of operation. Diplomatic channels went silent. Scientific communication networks ground to a halt as every delegate tried to process what they were witnessing. Jack's final analysis appeared on the primary display. Quantum communication efficiency, 300% above theoretical maximum previously established by the Zorn Computational Collective. The number hung in the air like a challenge. Ambassador Reynolds watched as the alien diplomatic representatives began to realize the full magnitude of the breakthrough. This wasn't just a new communication technology. This was a fundamental reimagining of how information could be transmitted across vast distances. Michael Thompson had done more than challenge scientific limitations. He had obliterated them. As the demonstration concluded, the forum remained in stunned silence. Centuries of established scientific understanding were crumbling before their eyes. Humanity had just changed everything. The quantum communication revolution was no longer a possibility. It was now an absolute reality. The aftermath of the quantum communication demonstration rippled across the galaxy like a tsunami of technological disruption. Within weeks of Michael Thompson's groundbreaking presentation, entire economic and political systems found themselves on the brink of fundamental transformation. The Zorn Computational Collective watched in horrified fascination as their millennia-old communication monopoly began to crumble. Trillion-credit communication infrastructure became obsolete overnight. Diplomatic channels that had been carefully controlled for thousands of years now faced complete restructuring. Ambassador Karen Reynolds sat in an emergency United Earth Council meeting, watching holographic projections that mapped the rapid technological spread. "This is more than a scientific breakthrough," she explained to the stunned diplomatic representatives. "This is a complete restructuring of galactic communication infrastructure." The quantum communication technology developed by Michael Thompson's team was nothing short of revolutionary. It wasn't just a faster communication method. It was an entirely new way of understanding information transfer. The adaptive neural networks could predict communication challenges, create redundant pathways, and learn from each transmission in ways no previous system had ever achieved. Military strategists were the first to recognize the full implications. Instantaneous communication meant real-time strategic coordination across hundreds of light years. Defensive systems could be coordinated with unprecedented precision. Intelligence could be shared without any time delay, rendering traditional espionage methods completely obsolete. Economic systems trembled. The current faster-than-light communication networks were controlled by a handful of alien corporations that had maintained a stranglehold on interstellar information transfer. Billions of credits in communication infrastructure became worthless in a matter of days. Jack Chen had become the primary technical interpreter of the breakthrough. His presentations broke down the complex quantum mechanics into digestible concepts that highlighted humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. "We didn't just create a new communication system," Jack explained during a Galactic scientific symposium. "We created a living, adaptive network that fundamentally reimagines how information can be transmitted." The quantum communication prototype demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond simple data transfer. It could predict potential communication interference, create dynamic transmission pathways, and learn from each interaction. The system was essentially a living, evolving network of information. Elena Rodriguez focused on the biological inspirations behind their breakthrough. Human researchers had long understood that the most efficient systems were those that could adapt, learn, and evolve. Their quantum communication technology embodied this principle in ways no previous scientific approach had achieved. Diplomatic channels exploded with activity. The Interstellar Confederation found itself forced to completely restructure its communication protocols. Civilizations that had maintained strict information control suddenly faced a world where instantaneous, unfiltered communication became the new standard. The economic implications were staggering. Communication had always been a form of power. Those who controlled information flow controlled galactic politics. Humanity had just redistributed that power in ways no one could have predicted. Smaller civilizations that had been marginalized by existing communication networks suddenly found themselves with unprecedented access to information. Scientific research could now be shared instantaneously. Collaborative projects that would have taken decades could now be completed in months. Michael Thompson watched the transformation with a mixture of scientific fascination and human pride. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent civilizations could interact. The quantum communication network began to show unexpected emergent properties. It wasn't just transferring information, it was creating new forms of communication that went beyond traditional data transfer. The system could now interpret context, predict potential misunderstandings, and create communication pathways that were both efficient and adaptive. Alien civilizations that had once mocked humanity now scrambled to understand the technology. Research teams from a dozen different species began attempting to reverse engineer the quantum communication prototype. But the truly revolutionary aspect was how the system had been conceived, a uniquely human approach that combined biological inspiration, adaptive learning, and a willingness to challenge fundamental scientific assumptions. Ambassador Reynolds understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just a technological achievement. This was a statement about human potential. The quantum communication revolution had transformed from a scientific possibility to a galactic reality. And humanity was just getting started. 5 years after the quantum communication breakthrough, the landscape of galactic civilization had been irrevocably transformed. The research complex on Mars that had once been a marginalized outpost now stood as a beacon of human scientific achievement, a pilgrimage site for researchers from across known space. Michael Thompson stood at the window of his research facility, watching a new generation of scientists work. The quantum communication network had become something far more profound than a mere technological innovation. It was a living testament to human potential, a bridge between civilizations that redefined the very concept of communication. Ambassador Karen Reynolds entered the room, her diplomatic credentials now carrying a weight that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The Interstellar Scientific Council wants to award you the highest honor of scientific achievement, she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Michael chuckled. The same council that tried to discredit our work 5 years ago. The transformation had been complete and absolute. The quantum communication network had dismantled centuries of established scientific and political hierarchies. Civilizations that had once maintained strict information control found themselves in a new world of unprecedented transparency and collaboration. Elena Rodriguez was now leading a multinational research initiative that brought together scientists from species that had previously been unable to effectively communicate. Her team was exploring the emergent properties of the quantum communication network, properties that seemed to suggest the system was developing something eerily close to collective intelligence. It's not just a communication network, Elena explained during a recent conference. It's a living system that learns, adapts, and evolves with each interaction. We're watching the birth of something entirely new. Jack Chen had become the primary interpreter of the technology's philosophical implications. His lectures explored how the quantum communication breakthrough represented more than a technological achievement. It was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent systems could interact. The economic implications had been staggering. Communication infrastructure that had been worth trillions of credits became obsolete overnight. New industries emerged, built around the adaptive quantum communication technology. Smaller civilizations that had been marginalized found themselves with unprecedented access to information and opportunities. Michael reflected on the journey. Their breakthrough had been born from a uniquely human approach, a combination of creative thinking, persistent innovation, and a willingness to challenge established scientific paradigms. Where alien civilizations saw rigid limitations, humans saw opportunities for transformation. The quantum communication network had revealed unexpected capabilities. It could now predict potential misunderstandings between different species, create translation pathways that went beyond simple language conversion, and develop communication strategies that considered cultural and biological differences. "We've created more than a technology," Michael told a group of young researchers. "We've created a new way of understanding connection itself." The diplomatic implications were equally profound. Conflicts that had simmered for centuries found new paths to resolution. Information could now be shared with unprecedented speed and clarity. The old power structures based on information control had crumbled, replaced by a more transparent, collaborative model of galactic interaction. Alina's latest research suggested that the quantum communication network was developing properties that went beyond current scientific understanding. It seemed to be creating its own form of collective intelligence, a system that could learn, adapt, and potentially even predict complex societal interactions. Jack's team was exploring the philosophical implications. "This is more than a technological breakthrough," he wrote in a groundbreaking paper. "This is evidence of a fundamental principle of universal communication that we're only beginning to understand." The Mars Research Complex had become a symbol of human potential. Where once humans had been viewed as newcomers to the galactic stage, they were now recognized as innovative leaders capable of challenging fundamental scientific assumptions. Ambassador Reynolds understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just about communication technology. This was a testament to human creativity, persistence, and the ability to see beyond established limitations. Michael Thompson looked at the quantum communication network's holographic display. What had once been a crazy idea in a marginalized research facility was now transforming how intelligent civilizations understood themselves and each other. The quantum communication revolution was complete, and humanity was just beginning to explore its potential.